Hello gamers, today's video is brought to you by our good friends over at Extra. Now ladies and gentlemen, what is the most important score? Is it your kill-death ratio? Is it your gamer score? Is it your trophy count? No, it's actually your credit score. Yeah, you want to buy a car, want to buy a house, want to buy anything tangible and don't want to get laughed at? You need a good credit score. But what if you don't? Well, ladies and gentlemen, our friends Extra have created this amazing card that functions like a good old-fashioned debit card with a twist. The way that it works is you connect your Extra account to your bank account, and they basically look inside and give you a spending limit based on what you have. No credit checks, no interest even. And in fact, what happens after that is then you go into the store, you make a little payment, and then they spot you that day for the payment. The next business day, there's an auto pay, and at the end of the month, all of those little purchases you made get tallied up and reported to the credit bureaus as good credit-worthy payments. And you can even get up to 1% in reward points that you can spend at the Extra reward shop. Ladies and gentlemen, having good credit is one of the most essential parts of a functional society and being a functional member of said society. I myself once was shamed out of purchasing a home because I had bad credit. You want to try to get good credit in today's society? You need every advantage you can get, ladies and gentlemen, and Extra might be the ace in your hole. If any of that interests you, head on over to extra.app, use our links and promo codes, and let's move on with the video. Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I'm excited to show you a video today about the build that I've been perfecting for the better part of a year. Now this is the ultimate computer build that I got. Remember last time where I showed you the poor shame Billy rig and I talked all about virtual machines? Today, it's that times 100. Now I know these videos aren't the most popular on my channel, and some of you all come for a variety of content over here. Sometimes we can be playing some absolute dumb games about haunted metaverses. Sometimes we can be talking about crazy whippings going on at a park. And sometimes we can be talking about Rockstar games. I like to make a variety of content on my channel. Really, this thing is more like a diary to me. So consider this a diary entry of when I've basically finally completed my ultimate rig. Now, I don't know what to name this, so I'm going to ask you all what to call it in the comment section below, but I think what's most important is basically structuring this video to show you why I'm doing this, how I'm doing this, and frankly, what benefits I get out of doing this. Now, I built what I consider to be a workstation computer. Now, this thing cost me several thousands of dollars. Now, if we're going to talk about computer setups, obviously, I'm going to get all the boring stuff out of the way. I don't overspend my money on crazy computer chairs. I think whatever I can get at Costco fits me fine enough. All right, if my butt feels like it has a cushion, I'm happy. As far as my peripherals go, I have some SteelSeries headsets, keyboards, and a Logitech mouse, which I think is really awesome. If anything, I overspend on my monitor. So I've got a super ultra wide and an ultra wide, and the ultra wides are great because I like to have as much screen real estate as I can. Now, beyond that, what I think is the most expensive part of my setup is the actual computer itself. Now, I have decided to combine not one computer, but two computers and three into one big beast. Now, why would I do this? Well, a lot of streamers and content creators typically do have two rigs, one to game on and the other one to capture and stream through, okay? But I've decided to combine that into just one. But not only do we have three rigs in one, I decided to make one monster computer rig so I can do things like program, and I can play around with TensorFlow and all these cool AI tools that are existing around. Basically, I want this thing to be a beast. So let's get started with what's actually in the computer. Now, this isn't a finished product by any chance, so before anybody is actually breathing really hard right now looking at how bad some of this build stuff is, let me go over a few things. Yes, the cable management isn't all the way there. Yes, that RTX 3090 and that AMD 6900, yes, both of the highest end cards from either manufacturer are in fact 69ing each other on the actual motherboard. Now, this isn't a completed build. Hell, I don't even have the RGB up and running. But basically, if you can really figure out the method to the madness, inside the CPU, I have a Ryzen 9 5950X, which you might be wondering, but Muta, why didn't you get an even better CPU? Honestly, if we were going to play the better CPU game, I'd be sitting here until 3112, okay? All right, I'd be long dead. That's a dragon you don't want to keep chasing. Frankly, this one was good enough for me, and I wanted to give some of the Ryzen stuff a chance. To understand, I am working on a water cooling solution, but to understand, water cooling is not as simple as it may sound. Now, that CPU has a NZXT Kraken all-in-one water cooler in it, which does the job for the most part. There's not that much upkeep. But if you ever build custom water solutions, you definitely need to be able to maintain
maintain them very well. Actually, I'm trying to find a couple people right now that are actually going to help me build a proper water cooling solution for these two cards. It's not as simple as it sounds. There's actually maintenance to it. Local stores and people will not do water cooling, at least for me, just because they've had customers in the past that have gotten water-cooled systems and like months down the road, they're like, it broke on me. Yeah, because they haven't been maintaining it, okay? You can't just have a water cooling system and fire and forget. You have to maintain it. You have to make sure the water is replaced properly with distilled water and all that crazy nonsense. So I'm actually trying to find a couple people to do that. So this isn't a completed build. We still are kind of testing things through and through. But generally, it's built enough for us to build the software and sort of get things going. Now that we've covered the magic part, let's get into actually building this whole system together. So now it's time for us to install our host operating system and get virtual machines up and running. So in order to get this going, and what we're going to be doing in this video, is we're going to install Manjaro Linux, which is the Linux distribution I'm using. So if you want to follow along, that's probably the best bet. It's an Arch-based Linux system that's easier to get up and going. All you got to do is download their ISO file on their website, get Balena Etcher, which you can run on Windows, Mac, or Linux, and just burn a USB drive, okay? And boot into it. Simple as that. But before we do it, we got to make sure we check out our BIOS. Every computer comes with a BIOS utility. So for instance, if we want to actually boot in, we're going to fire up our computer, and we should get this juicy ASUS screen. Frankly, one of the questions I get asked is, Mutahar, is this a really difficult thing to get going on underpowered hardware? I've been able to do this VM rig stuff on i5 processors that don't have hyperthreading. So really, you don't have to have the best-in-class stuff to do. It helps, but if you ever want to play around with these kind of like GPU pass-through virtual machines, I've made videos where I've even used one graphic card and shared them between. I wouldn't recommend that setup simply because at that point, just dual boot between the systems. But it's possible on weaker hardware. In fact, this hardware is overkill. Again, this is a workstation computer, not primarily a gaming system. So inside over here, one thing you want to make sure is you want to go to Advanced, and where your CPU configuration is, you want to make sure things like SVM and SMT are enabled. So SVM, since we're playing with AMD, this is the AMD version of Intel VTD, which is the virtualization extensions. So you want to make sure this is ready to go. And if you have things like secure boot, I think it actually helps if you go to OS type, and if it's set to Windows UEFI, make sure that it's other OS. Other than that, you should generally be good. Make sure if you do have multiple graphic cards that you can actually spot them right here as well. So once you're back inside here into the actual BIOS again, you want to make sure you go to the easy mode, which this is how we get into this point, and you want to make sure you hit where it says boot menu at the bottom right here. So hit the boot menu, and inside the boot menu, you're going to make sure you hit the USB device that you just made. So for me, it's UEFI Lexar USB drive 1100, okay? So hit enter on that, and frankly, you should be given this Manjaro screen. So it's got, its time, it's got all the stuff going on over here, but then you want to hit boot with open source drivers. Now, because I have both GPUs in, I'm actually going to be using the AMD graphic card, the 6900 XT, on the actual Linux distribution. I'm going to be passing through my NVIDIA card simply because of two reasons. According to Linux, okay, according to the actual god behind the kernel, Linus Torvalds himself, he said, fuck NVIDIA.
That NVIDIA has been one of the worst trouble spot we've had with hardware manufacturers. And that is really sad because NVIDIA tries to sell chips, a lot of chips into the Android market. And NVIDIA has been the single worst company we've ever dealt with. So NVIDIA, fuck you.
And you know what? This video is a bit outdated because that meme itself is dead. NVIDIA actually did cave in somewhat and actually open source some of their driver. A little wild that NVIDIA did this, but here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the end of an era, the end of a meme. Still not perfect, but we're getting there. So now that we're at the main screen over here, all right, when everything is said and loaded, we get treated to this beautiful little mountain wallpaper. I mean, Linux wallpapers all kind of suck ass, let's be honest. But let's go to install Manjaro Linux, okay? This is how we get it going. And there is a user guide up here, so if you want to get some documentation, you absolutely can. But now here's the actual install process. It's easier than Windows in my opinion. I think anybody that says installing Linux is hard, like Arch or Gen 2, really it's following a set of documents, a tutorial. If you can follow instructions along, you'll generally be safe, okay? I'm not saying it's dog shit easy, but it's also not rocket science, okay? Don't let a Linux elitist fool you.
But here we've got welcome to the installer. So again, pick whatever language you want. I'm going with American English. Hit next, and you got to pick your area. So I'm in Toronto, obviously. Let's hit next. And here, English USA and default, okay? That's my PC design. Now, here's the important aspect, okay? Make sure you know what drive you're formatting, okay? I'm trying to teach you. You click here, and you find the drive you actually want to burn. So all these drives I'm using, except this 500 gigabyte drive. This is what I'm using to just help you teach, okay? So click on this. It's going to go through a little bit of a scan storage device nonsense. It's going to basically look at what's on this drive. And then you want to erase the disk. You want to make sure it has some swap. So you can do no hibernate or hibernate. The difference is let's say you want to suspend your computer, right? Like you want to close your computer and sort of save what's on the RAM to the disk. So every time you power up your computer, it just sort of boots off without any issue. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go swap no hibernate. You want to have swap, okay? Don't think that just because you have 128 gigabytes of RAM, you don't need swap space. You absolutely need it, okay? Swap space is more than just, if I'm out of RAM, let's stuff everything in there, okay? So you want to do swap no hibernate, and here, just pick extension 4, okay? So ext4 is what you want. Now go next, and then over here, you put in your name. So I'm going to put in Muda, all right? And if you go with passwords, I'm just going to go with 123, okay? It's very easy to make shit going. Now here you're going to do same account for the administrator account, okay? So same password. That's your sudo password, and it's just going to make things easier. If you don't want to do this, you can give it a separate password for the sudo stuff. But for sake of simplicity, we're going to go with 123. So hit next, hit install, and go make yourself some G Fuel, okay? This will take some time. Go home, do something else, and come back in like 5 minutes, okay? It should be done by then. Here we go, Republic of Gamers. And if everything's down, it should actually just boot me. Here we go. So of course, right here, you can see that I've got extra options that you probably don't, like Windows and Arch. I'm gonna go right into Manjaro, simply because that's what we're kind of playing with. Now hit enter, and everything should just boot up and work, especially on AMD. If you have NVIDIA, you may have some issues. You may have to install some proprietary driveroos, but for the AMD people, that shit just works straight out of the box. So here I'm going to enter 123, and now we are in our fresh Manjaro install. So at this point, let's start hijacking our systems. First thing to do, though, is open up a terminal real quick, or actually, we can open up the package manager right here. And if you ever wanted to update Linux without looking like, I guess, some weird hacker, but here we actually have a couple updates to Furry Fox, Thunderbird, and Arch Linux App Stream Update and Matrix. Just hit apply and update, okay? Feed it that sudo password, which is 123, and yeah, there we go. It's just going to update for us. In fact, we can click this little arrow key, and we can kind of get like a snapshot of what's happening in the back end, but it's basically just updating packages, and once it's done, we should, yeah, have updated the system. It's all just fine and dandy. So yeah, congratulations, you just updated the system right here. Now, open up the little Manjaro thing and type in kernel real quick. And inside the kernel, one thing that we can do is we can just see what kernel we're running. So 5.15, kind of where we want to be at. Don't go to the experimental, you don't need real time, okay? What I will say is if you want to have something as a backup, install the long-term support version, okay? If any problem happens in the new kernel, you can always rely on the LTS stuff to just sort of save your ass, okay? So just hit yes and install that one real quick, just as a backup. All right, so if you want to learn how to isolate GPUs, all right, because we're on an Arch-based system, we can type in Arch Linux VFIO GPU pass-through, and usually on Google, the first result will be PCI pass-through via OVMF, which is directly from the Arch wiki itself. This is the guide we're going to be using to effectively do this entire project with, okay? So again, in order to do it, just follow the guide, okay? I'm going to follow it with you, and we're just going to get it set up and going. So first things first is going to ask you for a prerequisite, which is where do you have your Intel, or do you have your virtualization extensions? Earlier in the video, we did enable them through SVM. You got to support IOMMU. Frankly, a lot of the modern systems that we have do support IOMMU. And your guest GPU ROM must support UEFI. Look, it says all GPUs from 2012 and later should support this, because Microsoft even made it a requirement for devices that were running on things like Windows 8 at the time. And they said you want to have a spare monitor or multiple input ports connected to different GPUs. Yes, because we're using a GPU pass-through, you want to make sure you have an actual monitor connected as well. So let's get it started. So first things first, we want to enable IOMMU.
So the way that we do this is for AMD CPUs, all right, if it is on, the kernel detects IOMMU HW support from the BIOS. So if you're on Intel, all right, like I showed in previous videos, you want to go into your boot kernel parameters, you want to make sure you type in Intel IOMMU equals on there, and then boot using those parameters to enable it. Since we're on AMD, we should be able to see with this command if we have it enabled. So let's copy this, let's open up a terminal, and first off, let's paste it. But you see how it has the little pound sign? You want to make sure this is actually a sudo command. That's what the pound sign usually means. So do sudo, hit enter, it's going to ask you for your password. So again, hit 123, and here you can see if IOMMU is actually loaded. And in this case, it is. So IOMMU translated, IOMMU for AMD VI is loaded and initialized. It just works with AMD out of the box. There's a lot of benefits to having AMD. I'm going to sound like an AMD simp, okay? That's because it's good. That's because it's worth it, okay? I was wrong with Intel, all right? Friendship ended with Intel. Now I'm with AMD, all right? Jesus. Now, you got this nice little cute script right over here, which is what we're going to be using to make sure that our IOMMU groups are separated. Remember, for this to work, our graphic cards need to be sitting in their own IOMMU groupings, meaning they can't share the group with anything else. If they do, we have to patch the kernel. But usually with modern hardware, I don't really see this as an issue. Really, this is dependent on a lot of your hardware, your motherboard, and whatnot, okay? So let's copy this script right over here. You don't need to copy the bin bash or anything. So copy that, paste it in here, and just hit enter. And then you'll get this giant string tossed at you. So you might notice, holy hell, you've got a lot of IOMMU stuff. That's true. This is the downside of AMD. It's scattered everywhere, all right? So what we're doing is we're trying to find the NVIDIA, all right? So here we've got NVIDIA Corporation, NVIDIA Corporation. And actually, from what I can see, that's the only bit of NVIDIA that we have. So you can see it says 3090, and then you've got the audio device. You want to make sure both of these are copied. So again, highlight all this, right-click, copy, and inside the Manjaro Start button, type in the words Kate for your text editor, and just paste that in there. And then you want to probably save this somewhere to your desktop and just title it NVIDIA GPUs or something. Just as a frame of reference, whatever you feel comfortable with. Now that that's done, it's time to start isolating those GPUs. Now there's two ways that we can do it. We can bake this into the mod probe. Okay, we can bake this into the init ramfs, or we can just pass it during the boot time, kernel parameters. I'm going to show you how to do that. So when you open up a new terminal, you want to type in sudo for super user stuff, nano etc default grub. Okay, and once you do that, you want to just hit enter on this one and enter your password, and then you'll be given this little screen right here. So this is where if you had an Intel CPU and you wanted to enable IOMMU, in the line grub command line Linux default, after quiet and I believe or just quiet, you can type in Intel IOMMU equals on, if that's the command, right? But we don't need to do that, so we're going to get rid of all that, and we're going to make sure we introduce our VFIO stuff. So after security app armor, you want to introduce a new line, okay? So here is the line VFIO PCI.IDs. So all we have to do is type in VFIO dash PCI dot IDs equals. So inside this equal sign, we're going to copy the two IDs for the NVIDIA cards that we just isolated not 5 minutes ago. So inside these strings that we carried, what's important are these two little lines here. So 10DE and 10DE. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click this, we're going to copy, and inside here, we're just going to paste it in. And then we're going to separate both of these with a simple comma. So again, grab the second one, copy that, and we want to hit paste. Now if you have an extra space, you want to make sure it's all cleaned up and looking real cute and beautiful. So again, once that's done, hit Control X, and in the bottom where it says Save Modified Buffer, hit Y, hit Enter, and everything should be good. Now at this point, because we're using GRUB, which is the default bootloader that comes with Manjaro, again, different distributions have different bootloaders. You're going to make sure on the Arch Wiki, you go to the kernel parameters page and just figure out which one you have. I know that I'm on GRUB, that's what I'm going with. If you're on Arch, you're probably using systemd boot. So in GRUB, what you're going to do here is you're going to type in sudo grub -make config -o /boot grub and then grub cfg, okay? and hit enter, it's going to create this like it's going to basically create this little configuration file. It's going to go through all of this, and it'll be done in like less than a minute. And hey, look, Dark Souls 3 finished downloading. Now, this by itself alone won't work, and you need to make sure VFIO PCI is actually loaded early. If it isn't, the cards won't successfully hijack. So we've got one more step before we actually start installing a VM and then provisioning all of our little microcomputers within this mega workstation that we have. So here you want to actually go to sudo nano, all right, for the text editor, etc make init cpio.conf, okay? So once we get over here, this modules list right here is what's going to be very important. Inside this list, we're going to type in this exact string in order. So go over here, type in VFIO PCI, VFIO IOMMU underscore type 1, and then VFIO underscore ver QFD, okay? So when that's all good and dandy, you want to go down a little bit. I mean, make sure, again, all of this is in order and nothing is misspelled, because nobody wants to go back here and do this shit again. Inside the hook section, you want to make sure the word modconf is available, okay? So right here, between block and auto detect, I have it sitting. So again, Control X, hit Y, and save. But again, we have to make the init CPIO again. So do sudo make init CPIO, all right, and -P, all right, -P. So hit enter, and it's basically going to generate this for every kernel that you have installed. Earlier in the video, I installed the LTS kernel. So if you want everything to be harmonized between each and every single bit, you want to make sure you build for every single version of the kernel that you have. So the more kernels you have, the longer this process will take. But once that's done, hit reboot one more time, and let's hope that we have actually stolen the card away from Linux, okay? And actually, while this is booting up, this is a good time to discuss, should I take away my NVIDIA card or my AMD one? So Hackintoshes are kind of on their way out. Apple's making their own chipsets, and I doubt this whole practice will last more than 2-3 years. So NVIDIA has some really cool technologies that are unfortunately completely exclusive to Windows. So if you want to have DLSS at the best, Linux has it, but Windows is just far more easier and more maintained and updated by NVIDIA themselves. NVIDIA Broadcast, exclusive to Windows. RTX, much more easily readily available on Windows. It's not that you can't get RTX on Linux, it's just on Windows, it's better supported. That's what it's built for. So, that said, ladies and gentlemen, now that we've got the entire story built up, let's actually figure out what to isolate. If you're not using Macs and you want to have the best GPU like software technologies for Windows, then pass the NVIDIA one. If you want to pass the AMD one and keep the NVIDIA for Linux, that's up to you. Do whatever you feel like it. The process is similar depending on which GPU you want to pass through. So, like we dug up the IDs earlier, if you're passing the AMD one, instead of grabbing those NVIDIA IDs, make sure the AMD ones are isolated in their own IOMMU groups, and then pick out their own IDs themselves, okay? Simple as that. So of course, to install, we need things like libvirt and various packages. So here, we want to open up a new terminal, like so. And inside here, we're just going to open that up a little bit so we can actually see what the fuck we're doing in there. Do sudo pacman for the package manager, -S, and you want to type in QEMU, libvirt, all right, and you want to type in edk2 -ovmf, and virt manager, so we can have a little GUI in the entire process. Also, since we want to actually probably pass a network to it, do IP tables, -nft, yes, DNS mask SQ, woohoo, baby. And once that's all good and done, we also probably want to have SWTPM, just because since we're installing Windows 11, we also want to have a software, TPM device, so we can actually install stuff. So it's going to tell you that some things are in conflict. Remove IP tables and IP tables NFT are in, yeah, just go. And hit Y, make sure all of the stuff is there, hit yes, and again, just install these packages, and then we'll see what else we want to do. So we have Windows 11 just downloaded, ready to go. Let's actually get this going. Okay, so once all that stuff is installed, we have to make sure it's enabled, so do sudo systemctl-enable, enable, and you want to do, libvirt-d service, and just do -now, okay? So what the -now does is it also just started the service and enabled it. So you can actually just go and check its status like so. So in the status, it'll actually say it's running. So again, do another one where we do sudo systemctl enable, and we go to virtlogd.socket and 2 dashes and now. And once that's done, we're all good to go. Then we want to do sudo virsh net auto start default. That'll start it. And then we're going to do sudo virsh net start default just to start it right now, okay? Just to get it going in this instance. So once that's done, we're clear. And let's actually install the Windows 11 virtual machine. Inside the start menu, we're going to type in virtual machine manager, and we're going to get this little icon right here. So click on this, and we're going to go. It's going to ask us of the sudo password. I don't know why that was escaping me. And once we're connected into the daemon here, we're going to click this little new button right now. So we're going to go local installation media, hit browse, browse local, and we're going to find where that Windows 11 ISO was. It's probably in your downloads folder, hit open. If it identifies as Windows 10, that's because it kind of is. So hit forward, and if it says you may not have search permissions, just hit yes, it'll fix itself up. Here we can give it a certain amount of memory. I have 128 gigs. I know that in this little PC, I want to give it 64 gigabytes. If it asks you for CPUs, you can give it 30. Honestly, we're going to have to change this a little bit anyway. So hit forward, and inside over here, it's going to ask you to enable storage. Now, something cool that you can do is actually pass an entire drive through. So let's say you wanted to have your cake and eat it too. What if you wanted to virtualize Windows, but let's say you also wanted to play games like Valorant or Siege, and instead of going through the virtual machine route, you might say, maybe I'll boot into it bare metal. So if you actually pass an entire drive along, which I'll show you how to do it right now, if you go into your terminal, like so, and type in the words lsblk, you'll notice right over here we have various partitions. I know that the partition I want for Windows is probably going to be somewhere around the portion of SDB, okay? So SDB, if I can actually open up a new little task manager over here, you can see that basic data partition is actually where Windows is installed. So if I right-click this and actually just mount this real quick, you can see that this is a Windows installation. It literally has a Windows folder right here. But if I right-click and hit Properties, you can see that, if all is mistaken over here, it is /dev SDA3. But for now, just to show you the install, we're going to create a quick little disk image. So somewhere along the lines of, I think, 150 gigabytes is a good starter point for Windows. So here we're going to title this Win11, and we're going to customize it before the installation. So hit Finish. And here, first things first, we're going to go to chipset Q35, and we're going to pass through UEFI secboot.fd. We want to pass through all the secure boot stuff right now, since it's Windows 11. So hit Apply, then go into where it says CPU. Here you want to go to Topology, and you want to make sure you set the sockets to 1, because it is a 1-socket CPU. Because this is a hyper-threaded CPU, we actually have 16 cores, but each has 2 threads on it. So here we're going to type in 15, and we're going to type 2 threads. So here you can see it says vCPU is 30. I've saved 2, basically 1 core for Linux, so that the system can actually, so Linux will use what it has, and Windows can stick to itself. Linux doesn't have a whole lot of system requirements. Unless you're planning to game between Linux and Windows at the same time, you may want to split this by half the allocation. So basically half your processor to one system and half to the other. So at this point, hit Apply, go to Memory, again, keep that the same. In SATA, in the drive here, it's usually just fine as it is. And right here, you want to make sure, well, for now we have display, spice, and sound and everything. This is just for installing. And here you can add pieces of hardware. So we're going to add a TPM module just for Windows. So here you're going to click Add Hardware, you're going to TPM, and here you're going to make sure you have CRB, emulated, and version 2.0. So hit Finish and have that attached. Once that's done, hit Begin Install, and let's get ready to go. So here we're installing Windows 11, and if all things are perfectly peachy and dandy, we should be able to see some level, oh, here it is, Tiano Core. So again, hit any key to boot in, And let's get started to install it. Now, I'm sure the tech literate out of all of you watching probably know what a Windows installation looks like. This process hasn't changed since basically the beginning of time. So go through this all the way until the desktop, and then feel free to connect your pass-through graphic cards, and we can move on to the final stages and the further optimizations we need. But here we want to add hardware and go to PCI and find where you have your NVIDIA GPUs. Since we had to pass through two VFIO IDs, we only have two of these, so the RTX 3090 and the audio controller. You want to make sure you absolutely pass both of them through, okay? You need to do that more so than anything else. So now that we've done that, we can just basically hit play and see how this whole story burns in real quick. Now, once you hit play and you've connected that NVIDIA system, that NVIDIA GPU to another monitor, you'll get a signal, okay? So simple, easy stuff so far. Install the graphic driver and you're basically good to go. Now here's where we're going to switch to a finished system and sort of cover the final finishing touches and the flares on the system and what makes it really ultimate. I know the video's long as hell, but there's a lot to cover. So here's a finished system that I have going on with a bunch of random things that I have connected, okay? So for here, this is my actual Arch Linux rig right now. Now this is a final system where actually I've been recording videos like the Halo 3 video that you saw a couple days ago. And I've also got various games like Left 4 Dead 2 and Resident Evil and Ready or Not and Resident Evil Village. So it's a functioning gaming system and everything works just fine and peachy underneath it. Now, of course, in this entire system, I also have various tools like OBS, for instance, which comes packed with various different stream systems that I have going on. So for instance, if I want to actually use things like my DSLR, I have it fed through into my actual system. I also have got Looking Glass, which is something we're going to look at real quickly. Now, I've shown a lot of this stuff before on my channel, but something that's really important is to show you why I chose to go around and build this computer. I could have just built 3 separate systems, paid slightly extra just to give them their own, individual components, and probably called it a day and networked it around. I actually used to do that just for a lot of dual PC streaming setups. Now, to get under why I'm doing it, is it the gaming? No, I was gaming just fine before anyways. For me, the gaming is a nice benefit, but for me, having a workstation is super duper important. As you all know, I make videos nearly every day, right? I skip a day here and there just to take time off. Like for instance, next week, I'll be going down to Los Angeles, California. So I'll be taking like 4 days off, which is, a vacation for me at this point from YouTube. But I like to make videos nearly daily because I have a lot that I want to talk about. I have a lot of interests that I want to get into. Sometimes I'll cover a crypto investigation. Sometimes I'll cover, some random goofy stuff on the internet. And, from time to time, I'll return to things like deep web browsing. I like to cover things like viruses, malware. So there's a lot that comes onto my plate. I have a very scattered mind and I like to make a video every day. Now, of course, if you understand, people who are in the YouTubing space typically also have editors as well. We have an editor for things like the Some Ordinary Podcast. But for my channel, this is like a diary for me, and I actually enjoy the editing process. What I don't like enjoying is all the boring stuff before the entire editing process. So the reason why this PC is important is using technologies like Looking Glass, I'm able to create a VM and also capture it without ever needing one of those fancy expensive capture cards that work or do not work or always have like a driver update that fucks something up. So for me, using Looking Glass to capture the frame memory of one virtual machine and just pass it to OBS on a different streaming virtual machine is important. So to understand, I have a standard Windows VM that I used to just record everything on. I have a recording/streaming virtual machine, which basically is a computer that literally just has OBS. It basically captures the video memory from the actual Windows VM that I have, just so it can all process into it. Have all the audio, have all the face cam, if you will, all into it as well. And then I have a general Linux host operating system that I just use for everything else. So, generally like playing the games, just having my main computer, right? So the reason why I have multiple graphic cards and 128 megabytes of RAM is when I create each of these virtual machines, I give them somewhere from the range of 32 to 64 gigabytes of RAM. Literally, I create 64 gig RAM VMs, right? And then I have their own SSDs or hard drives that I pass to them. And the reason I have 2 graphic cards, the AMD and the NVIDIA card, is typically that I use those high performance cards. So I'll pass the AMD one to a streaming computer, and that entire job on that graphic card is to just create a nice clean video. Now, why is this really important? Well, to have them all in one place allows me to keep the security of my system intact. So, for instance, since I'm running it all under a Linux hypervisor and I control what goes in and out, I know that for a fact I'm not being hacked, okay? I keep this stuff very monitored. I make sure that nothing leaks out of the system that it shouldn't. And I also don't like having Microsoft Windows spy on every aspect of my computer anyways. That's just fucking creepy. But the other big aspect is to make life easier. Remember I told you people have editing teams? For me, I'm just a simple one-man shop. And the reason I keep it that way is I try to optimize every form of editing that I can. I try to optimize every form of the video recording process, so I spend less time doing boring stuff and more time recording and just, generally making a video, right? So for me, I have my streaming VM that I just literally have one script that I feed into it. The script literally fires up the virtual machine, fires up OBS, starts recording the face cam, starts recording the audio track, starts recording the Windows virtual machine where it's capturing the, desktop footage from, the capture card, if you will. And then it creates a nice little sync note underneath it so that I can easily import it into an editing software and just start working. Basically, through this method, I save, I would say, 50 to 75% of the time that it would take to do all the boring stuff that you keep repetitively doing. So I can focus more on just making an actual video, editing, posting, and having a time over there. It allows me to live a normal career, okay, have a normal job, and then do YouTube on the side. Because if I didn't have a method like this, if I didn't have a method to the madness, I would literally go fucking insane because that would be a lot of hours you put into, just doing the same repetitive task over and over again, and it would drive you insane. Now, beyond all of it, it allows me to also do multiple tasks all at the same time. So for instance, let's say that I am recording a video, but I need to render out a bunch of, pointless, or not pointless, but I need to render out a bunch of, graphics lugs, for instance. Remember the Mandela catalog video we did, and I had those, shots where I would literally have, my, body sort of green screen onto the side and have my entire desktop? The only way that I'm able to do that is through things like rotoscoping. That is a very computationally intensive task. So while I'm recording something, or generally browsing the internet, I spin up another editing virtual machine, which is the streaming VM, and it just fires up Adobe After Effects and does all the rendering on the side without ever impacting my main system. Now, I did this because the hardware that we buy today, especially CPUs and the amount of RAM that's available to us, allows us to create these massively heavy workstations that we can then split virtual machines on and create and basically, divert the tasks. We can basically, if I'm having a 32 threaded system, I'm not using all 32 threads on one game at one time. I can actually split that up and have it do something else while the other half of my CPU does something else. So for me, it's a way to containerize and optimize my computing setup, right? I know it sounds complicated, but once you have the knowledge and you can get it all working, it absolutely saves you a bunch of time, and it's a cool little showpiece to talk about with your computer friends, right? Like, everyone's gaming systems probably just has Windows or Linux or something running underneath it, but this one allows me to run Windows, Linux, and also Mac OS because I have that AMD card. So I can basically have the triple beast, I can have the ultimate system, the best workstation, and it runs very well. The only downside to a system like this, and I'm sure you can understand, is it gets really hot in this room. With having a billion fans in the system, that's a bit of a hyperbole, no doubt, but having the best airflow and the best cooling and the best water stuff right now, this system still produces a gargantuan amount of heat. Obviously, it is a very, very heavy system, no doubt about that. So if you're going into this expecting to have a cool, efficient running system, it'll be efficient. It ain't cold. So I think the next step for me, before we tie all this off, is maybe I should take this system, probably put it in another room where it's better ventilated, and then I'll probably buy a thin client, which is sort of a really small sort of set-top box, and just feed my video from this system into that, or send a virtual machine to that thin client, sort of how they do it in a corporate structure anyways, so the entire setup can be even cleaner and the room can run even colder. But ladies and gentlemen, this is my ultimate dream system, and before I tie things off and before I end it, I do have to give you all a massive thank you. We've been doing this for, almost 10 years at this point, and I remember way back in the day, we started off with the fucking crap top. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the old crap top, which is currently sitting in a storage unit right now. I will never get rid of that crap top because that is where we began. That is where we recorded Haunted Gaming Pokemon Creepy Black. All right, that's where the whole story began. That's where, you know, we posted Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Let's Play. That's where the story began, you know? And the story has taken so many years, and there's been so many journeys. There's been moments where we made creepypastas, and then we stopped doing that, and we moved into the deep web, and then, you know, we stopped making them every week because, hey, who wants to see the same fucking Hitman site every week? Those videos will come. I am working on a deep web one right now. It takes me a while to just grab quality over quantity, especially when it comes to that kind of stuff anyways. Virus investigations, you know, having the fucking time of our lives commentating over the dumbest shit in the world. This journey has lasted me several years, and without any of you, this computer would not have been possible. I wouldn't even have thought about it in my dreams. So for me to build this is literally a dream of mine coming true. I wanted to build one of the best computers ever. I wanted to have that dream system. I remember from the crap top putting it up to a fucking desk fan so that it wouldn't burn out and like overheat while rendering a video on Sony Vegas. Now I'm able to render several videos all at once while being able to play games and having a good time. And there's no one else that made it possible but you guys, my closest friends, like Kyle, like Amaru, like Nick, like Jordan, like a lot of those people that are like rocks to me, okay? Wouldn't have been there without parents, without, you know, the people in my personal life. This is all very important to me. And the only reason I'm able to even live these dreams is thanks to you. So I wanted to really reiterate that as much as possible. And I can't confirm it yet, but I am going to try and talk to a couple friends of mine in the PC building space. Nothing's confirmed yet, so I'm not even going to be naming names. And hopefully, maybe, by the time I come back from Los Angeles, I might try to get one of you guys to live your dreams, one of you guys and gals. Because a computer like this just shouldn't belong in one space. It should belong to anybody with the passion to do this kind of stuff. That said, though, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it.